Good morning, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Welcome to HP to XP. I am your friendly host for the day and dungeon master for the Umbranthal campaign, Chris. We are going to hang out this morning, chat, gab, and do a little bit of world building. So, welcome to the folks who have already jumped in this morning. Morning Fastcat, morning Pim. Nice to see both of you already this morning. So the idea for these Saturday streams is basically just a jump in, hang out, gab, a chance for me to pay attention to chat, answer questions that people might have, and just kind of get into the world and be able to connect with community. As we're ramping up here and launching this live streamed campaign on the 16th, one of the things that we've dedicated ourselves to is not spending any time as performers or players engaging with chat. And the reason that we've made that decision is that we want our gameplay to be our focus during that time. There's nothing wrong with folks who want to engage with chat during a game. That's just not the style that we're going for. The idea is that we want to be able to, again, just stay focused on the game, to be in the moment, to not be distracted. And we have certain things that we're trying to accomplish there. So the idea here with Saturday mornings is that it's a nice time to get together. It's a great time to be able to engage with the folks who care about what we're doing that are outside of the US time zones, like Pim, who's over in Europe, and be able to get involved in also showing a little bit more of sort of at this stage of the game what I do to help create all of this on my end. I think it's important to remember that I don't consider myself to be the creator by any stretch of the imagination. This really is HP to XP really is all about the community in general, and our players, along with myself as the DM and our what I'm referring to as non-party player characters, our NPPCs, creating this world. That said, there is back-end heavy lifting that a DM has to do, as you all know if you're familiar with Dungeons & Dragons or any other kind of tabletop role-playing game, right? You need to create NPCs, you need to create towns, you need to create interesting aspects in the world, and that's sort of the overall plan for these Saturdays, is to engage with doing some of those things and showing you some of those things behind the scenes. Once we get to the first of the year, we've got some other ideas for all of this that I think are going to be pretty interesting. But I don't want to tip my hand on any of those yet. Sooner or later, we're going to get into those. I do want to remind everybody that if you would like, you can jump in and join us over on our Discord server. That is something that apparently my chat command got turned off. So yeah, you can join us over on Discord. I'm going to go ahead and repaste the link because I don't know what I did to my chat commands, but I'm stupid. So I'm still learning Twitch and all of these things, but there you go. Hey DJ, welcome to chat, and enjoy your game this morning. Jump in anytime you can. Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to kind of kick the morning off with today was just some cool shit that has happened in the last week. And first off, we made affiliate, which I think is a testament to this community. It's a testament to the folks who want to see this campaign, who want to participate, and all the effort that you are doing to show people that this is hopefully going to be a really cool thing to be a part of, a cool community to be a part of. So having made affiliate, we have had, it's just been cool. It's been super exciting for all of us. We're already up to 21 subscribers, so we've already unlocked 2 emotes. So if you are looking to just spam the heck out of emotes in chat. I'm totally cool with that. We so far have unlocked our Owlbear attacking with a battle axe and our Flumph, which are absolutely amazing. We had a great artist do our emotes and our sub batches. She's Melmo Plays on here, and at some point I'll figure out how to do all the shout out commands. But again, learning. So that's one of those things that we'll figure out. But yeah, absolutely amazing artwork. We've got two more super neat, what I think are super neat emotes, and I think everybody within the team that has seen them is pretty excited about them. That once we hit 25 subscribers, we unlock the next one. So we're only 4 subscribers away from unlocking that one. So I'm really looking forward to that dropping in and seeing what happens with that. So, but along with having hit affiliate, we've also, what I think is just kind of stupidly super cool. If you look at this, right now, HP to XP is in the top 2% of channels on Twitch. The subscriber numbers are a little out of date because we screenshotted this a few days ago. We're up to 73 followers and like I said, right now 21 subscribers. So it would be super. I can't wait for us to unlock this next emote, and it's just insane to me that so far we have seen so much interest, so much support. It's just super cool. It's super exciting. One of the things that so far works is that you can also join us over on our various social media accounts. We do maintain an Instagram account. We do maintain a Twitter account. Hey, look at that. The Discord link's in the socials one. So I don't have to worry about that. You can join us over on Discord. And then we also have a YouTube page. As most of you know, everything that happens on Twitch eventually falls off. Twitch does not maintain the long form VOD content that a lot of people are looking for, right? Twitch is absolutely amazing for this live experience, the live chat community, and for folks who sort of want that old school television feel of what I always refer to as having a date with your television, right? It's nice to set aside time where you're going to say, I'm going to go do this. And for those of you this morning who are watching us live, it's coming and joining in on HP to XP live. But not everybody can do that. And one of the joys of the internet is time shifting, right? That's why we have DVRs now. It's why we love other forms of media being able to be consumed on our own time. So one of the things that we're doing is taking all of our live stream content and putting it up on YouTube as a VOD in time. At least right now we're putting all of it up there. I think at some point we may get to the point where there are things that we are doing that are only ever going to show up on Twitch because they're really sort of locked into a particular time. But right now we're going ahead and taking all of that stuff and uploading it over there. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you are able to see all of the interviews that we've done with our cast members so far, starting with Steph and ending with Sarah Kay, who is my original co-conspirator in developing the idea for HP to XP and getting it off the ground. So Fastcat, thanks for joining in chat today and for joining in this whole insane project so far. One of the other things that we are going to start doing over on the YouTube channel, probably in the coming weeks, understandably, there's been a whole lot happening in the last month getting this channel up and running, getting the game prepped, finding the people who are going to play in our main game, as well as starting to find some of our NPPCs who are going to be contributing to the world. And so I've had some questions about the whole non-party player character thing, and I think this is a perfect time to sort of talk about that a little bit, and then we'll get into the world building stuff. But my idea with the non-party player characters is that one of the things that makes D&D special is the party's interactions with all the various characters in the world. And at the normal sort of table game, the normal over the table game, it falls to the dungeon master to do all of that creation, to write all of those roles, to perform all of those roles. And that makes sense. It's hard to know when it would be appropriate to have a friend drop in and join in and have a substantive role to play, right? And not every campaign is designed in such a way where you can just have people drop in and out. Not every campaign runs the way you would, say, something like an Adventurers League table where folks can just show up that night, play, and they disappear. Lots of campaigns, ours included, have a lot of backstory involved, and having that history is important. So one of the things that I had set out from sort of the origin point of this in my head as the DM was that I wanted to have other players contributing at the table in what would traditionally be NPC roles. So rather than coming in and simply playing a player character who comes in and helps the party for a little bit of time, in some cases I have sought out folks to be non-party player characters who are going to be other major figures in the world. They may be allies to our players. They may be antagonists to our players. All of these things are possible. They may just be random characters that the players interact with that may or may not have any deeper impact on the storyline. But the idea there is that it allows the players to interact, it allows our audience to interact and see additional perspectives that aren't all just coming out of my head, right? I think I'm hoping to bring some really interesting NPCs. I'm hoping to bring some really interesting storylines to this campaign that people are going to like. But two heads are better than one in a lot of cases. Having additional collaborators ensures that you have a wide range of perspectives and ideas represented. And I come back to this point because I think it's important. This is a public art project, right? It's a collaborative public art project. It's not a game just among friends or just among people who want to sit down and play at a table together, whether that table is virtual or live. It's just a fact of the matter, right? So with that in mind, more voices are better. This isn't scripted. It is D&D, right? It's improv, and it is... So we have started with what I'm referring to as episode zeros. This past Wednesday, some of the players joined me for a episode 0A where we began the campaign. This coming Wednesday, other players are going to be jumping in who weren't in that first episode 0A for episode 0B. And it's our opportunity to start having a little bit of RP, starting to get things happening on the backside of the campaign. And on December 16th, that's when the party's going to come together and the campaign is really going to kick off. Excuse me. But one of the things that I have already found myself in a position of having to do is because of the things that those players who played on Wednesday did, the choices they've made, they've already changed the world. They have already affected what I was planning to do with my episode 0B this coming week. So we're adjusting on the fly, and that's the best part of D&D. So as I start getting into some of the world building stuff that we're going to do today, we're not going to be creating things for specific scenes necessarily. We're not going to be creating for specific moments. Two reasons. One, I know my players are in chat. Hello, Friday. It is awfully early on the the left side of the North American continent, but I welcome you for getting up early. I know it's not really early for you at this point, but still. But so I have players in chat, so we're not necessarily going to shoot for spoiling anything, but I do want to show folks sort of how I go through creating things, as well as give you the opportunity to throw ideas in, right? This is an opportunity for the community to contribute ideas about what would be cool. Am I going to use every single one of them? No, I'm not. I mean, that's just the nature of creation, right? But I do want to incorporate a whole lot of ideas that you may have. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead, jump into sort of the meat and potatoes for today. And I'll be paying attention to chat. So please, let me know if there's something that you want to talk about. If there's an idea that you have, throw it in there and we'll go from there. So I'm going to be working today in DungeonDraft to start. There are two programs that I like to use for world building maps and background ideas. DungeonDraft and WonderDraft. Both of them are created by Megasploot. They're really neat programs. They are available, I believe, for for all three Windows, Mac, and Linux platforms. I used both WonderDraft and DungeonDraft on my Mac before grabbing my streaming and video editing PC that I'm working on now. They worked fine. However, they're absolutely written for the Windows user in mind, so they're much easier to use with Windows, in my opinion, so far, just in the little bit of shifting experience that I've had with them. So some things that I am looking to accomplish in our world building today is creating a tavern, doing some work on a random town and or village that my players are going to interact with at some point. And then maybe, depending upon how all this goes and what everybody in chat's interested in, we may also drop out of DungeonDraft and open up WonderDraft and just talk about how I use that to do general world building, larger scale sort of continent world building, and some of the tools. I'm going to start by just kind of throwing you some things here in DungeonDraft, and we'll kind of go from there. So one of the things that... mouse actions. There's the problem. See, I turned my tablet on for drawing and then immediately drug my mouse across the tablet. So let me get the keyboard out of the way and drag the tablet into play. We'll use the tablet to make life easier here. Easier except for the fact that I'm going to knock my coffee over. I'm going to bump the mic. We're doing it live, kids. So we're going to see how all of this works. Chris is still learning. So welcome to wherever you are. So we're going to go to new. I like using the larger templates for things. I'm also going to get better at not saying see, I used to teach a ton of live. I used to teach a ton live. I used to teach a ton of classroom sessions, and in that time I had gotten very good about not using those random placeholder sort of words like stuff like that. But the reality is, like everyone else, I use those in my day-to-day language. So one of the things that we're working on is getting better at this. Zuriel, you have to do a shot right now because I said So one of the things that I used to do when I started teaching more live things was to impose a penalty on myself when I used one of those placeholder sort of language moments, right? When I used an or something like this, and the placeholder term was motherfucker. So literally, if I was in front of a class and said, I would immediately have to follow it up with motherfucker, which is an incredible disincentive for being lazy and taking those verbal pauses with a motherfucker, right? So maybe we'll go with that. It's Twitch. It is a live motherfucker. It is a live stream moment, and we have a mature content warning. So if you do not want to hear me say and make Zuriel take a shot, followed up by me saying motherfucker, then pretty quick here. This is going to be the Samuel L. Jackson version of live streaming. So that's the idea. Motherfucker. Zuriel asked, Zuriel, you are going to be very drunk if you are taking shots today every time I say motherfucker. Let's go with every time I use, and I'm putting it in quotes this time so we don't have to do it, just for illustrative factors. If I say you have to take a shot. I'm not going to make you do it if I say I guess I'm not really making you do anything. It was your idea, and I'm not there to enforce it, so it's your game. Play it however you want. But Zuriel asks, is DungeonDraft usable with Roll20? I believe it is. We are using FoundryVTT for our game, and I have only a limited amount of experience with Roll20 because I wasn't really thrilled with it when I was using it. I started using Roll20 back in the spring when I began DMing some games online, and my understanding of it is a little more limited, but the way I believe you can use DungeonDraft or WonderDraft or any of these is that when you export your files, you can export them and then upload those as a image to something like Roll20 and use it in the background. There's a couple of options for export. I'll just go ahead and show these right now. So when you're exporting a file, obviously I'm not going to export a blank screen here, but you can export as a PNG, a JPEG, or as a universal VTT. That universal VTT file is something that that virtual tabletops, I don't know if I said it, I'll just say it anyway, motherfucker. That VTT file is something that tabletop software can open up. I have only so far used it with Foundry, but I would assume that it being a file like that you can upload it to Roll20 as well. You can get, I've paid for DungeonDraft, I've paid for WonderDraft, there's nothing sponsored here. I purchased both of these using the Humble Bundle links. Motherfucker, I don't know if you can purchase them through some other site or directly from Megasploot, but the Humble Bundle source is a perfectly reasonable way to do it. So as we get into wanting to build something, there are a whole set of options here. So the first thing I'll do is there is an option to just generate either a dungeon or a cave. If you generate a cave, you get a very simple auto-generated cave complex that you can then go in and manipulate. Let's say I don't want that because I don't really want to do a cave today, despite what Friday is looking for me to do. The other option is that I can auto-generate a dungeon if that's what I'm looking to do. And should be pretty obvious. Caves and caverns, more rugged. We assume that dungeons have more of a solid, planned, designed feel to them. However, I'm not going to do either of those today because I am not looking to create a dungeon and or a tavern today, at least not to start. I am looking to create a tavern. So I like using DungeonDraft for this because I have it. It's a nice tool. There's a lot of functionality. What I will say about my use of DungeonDraft and WonderDraft is that I do not have asset packs installed. So there are a lot of different sources out there where you can add asset packs to work with these. 2-Minute Tabletop is a creator that I've looked at quite a bit. I purchased some of their player tokens that I will use in Foundry from time to time. They have a tremendous number of asset packs. I believe they're the only one that I've spent any time really looking at. But 2-Minute Tabletop has a pay what you want option for their assets, but they also have a pretty nice bundle package where you can download all of their assets. And I think it's, don't quote me on the price, but I think it's like $250 US for everything that they have. And they've created a tremendous amount of content. So you will find that I drink a lot of liquids pretty much all day long. So with that said, let's get into our generation. So maybe skipping out of the, I don't want the map wizard. So I'm going to start without the map wizard because I don't want to deal with it. 100%. Drop that scale down. Scaling's nice on this. You don't have a tremendous amount of zoom functions unless you're using your mouse. But I find for me that the sort of the easy to move options work just fine. So I'm going to start with some terrain. When you get into terrain, you have 4 options that you can select within any of the various territories. So you have different biomes. Those biomes have default settings for the landscape that you want to use and what appears there. Zuriel has created a Rumba Room tavern that caters to Yanti purebloods who like it hot or those immune to poison, as the bar serves poisonous mixed drinks. The group's paladin loved it as he could burn his healing pool and get to enjoy the dancers. I like it, Zuriel. That's a fun little take. Maple, I don't know that I'm going to start with the Moose theme park today. Wally World is in fact closed. So sorry, folks. Moose out front should have told you. We are going to go ahead and start with a real simple town. I actually like to use the prairie setting as my default for this because most of the time when I am creating, I like my background to be grass, unless there is a very specific terrain feature that I'm going for. So this campaign, however, is a very sort of, I want it to be a very original space. So it's one that I have not yet, see, I left the map wizard on. It's one that I have not yet really created. I'm reusing ideas. I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't. This campaign world actually started as a campaign world that I had been working on for a previous campaign. And when I first began building it out, I took it whole cloth. Just took it, moved it over. And then I started writing. And what happened when I started writing is that I went from having a fully done world map with a fully done idea, fully structured out, to, well, what if I did this? Oh, this is an idea that interests me, and started changing things. In other streams, I've talked about the fact that there are 2 dominant known continents in the world of Umbranthal. There is Ulatova, which is the principal continent in which our campaign will begin, and then there is a continent known as Klostal that has been discovered in roughly the last century. And that is a land that is just beginning to really be explored by the 3 principal nation states of Ulatova. So there's a lot of room for development there. That continent of Klostal existed in a very different way in the campaign that sort of gave birth to this. And it's become a whole new thing. The entire concept of it has changed in a lot of ways. In the old campaign, the continent had been settled for quite some time, as opposed to only having been discovered more recently. So in the previous campaign, that continent, and the I should say that the domain of that continent was vastly different. It was different sized. Its principal structures were much different. Its resources were much different. And it had a series of connecting towns and villages that circled the outside perimeter of the entirety of the land. It was really more of an island, though, than a continent in and of itself. In this new campaign, Clausthal is a continent, and it has only just recently been discovered. So while the major political powers, the Commonwealth, the Owlbear Kingdom, and the Politia, have they've established a physical presence on Clausthal, they have yet to really begin exploring it deeply. It is a realm in which many different avenues for exploration still exist, both for the player characters, if they choose to go to Clausthal or end up there for some reason, as well as for the other characters in the game. I think living games require... I'm going to start going ahead and doing some drafting. Motherfucker. I'm going to start doing some drafting while I talk here, because I think it'll make everything more interesting as opposed to you all staring at a blank brown screen while I talk. So we're going to start with Prairie here. I'm going to switch again to Limestone, and I'm just going to start laying out some ideas for a very simple, small town. I use the snap and grid functions when I start building just to help give me some orientation, but I do not export these maps with the grid turned on, because when I bring them into Foundry, I want to be able to adjust for the Foundry tabletop. Excuse me, I'm very burpy today, I apologize. But I want to adjust for the Foundry tabletop, and I want its graphic settings to be the ones that matter. So I'm going to start with using the grid here, but I will turn it on and off. I also will start by using snap, which snaps our illustration to the grid form, but I will also turn that on and off as needed. I agree, Zuriel, that keeping things open-ended so you can make stuff up later is really important. I've said before that when I begin designing a world, I am not looking for I'm not writing a book, right? Books are meant to be very cohesive, pulled together, and understandable to the reader from the outset. So I'm just going to start kind of sketching in a road here. Dirt road. Not looking for anything super dynamic right now. We'll just kind of start getting it in place, and it'll divide the map into a upper and lower half, and then we can start building around that. So, like I said, one of the reasons I like using the grid here at the initial stage is it does help kind of dial in sizing of stuff. It's really unlikely that a wagon road would only be 5 feet wide, so we definitely want it to be more than a single square. But I also think that it's pretty common in a lot of undeveloped areas or underdeveloped areas that you aren't necessarily going to have a true 2-lane road. You might not have the ability for wagons to pass one another sort of willy-nilly, right? So if we were in that sort of area, in my mind, it would be more likely that we would have a little bit more development, which is what would lead to a limestone road. Now, let's say for argument's sake, just to talk about how DungeonDraft works a little bit and WonderDraft works very similarly. Let's say I decide, oh, I really do want that to be a more developed road. I want it to be limestone. I can just go in and change that terrain, but something to keep in mind, if I also wanted to have a just a random area of dirt, right? Worn out from the trotting of horses. If I go in and make that change here, everything that holds that layer property becomes the same material. So I am not going to have my little patch of dirt. But right now, real simple little road. I love to use gravel as a accent because I feel like a lot of times if you have worn out a road, you're going to end up with rocks along the way, right? Any of us who have done any amount of hiking or Jeep trail off-roading or just trotting through more undeveloped wilderness areas know that as you are trotting a path, you end up kicking up a whole lot of rocks. And what happens is you pick rocks up and you chuck them off to the side of the trail. They generally don't go too far and they end up forming a little bit of a border. So for me, that just adds a little bit of visual interest. Again, I use just these very simple map packs. I have never been a big battle map or mini sort of player and or DM. Most of the games that I have played have been Theater of the Mind style. So getting into this world of map making in this way, where it's really has that visual styling that is supposed to be interesting for the player and help with maintaining things like speed and movement and understanding those things, is something that I'm really enjoying getting into. I consider myself to be a reasonably artistic person. I'm not much of a pen and pencil drawing type person, but I am the kind of person who enjoys art, enjoys design. I'm a reasonably decent amateur graphic artist. I can make you a decent logo in Photoshop or Illustrator, things like that. Not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I will absolutely default to using something like the website remove.bg to pull a background out of a Photoshop image rather than jump in, use the lasso tool and mask about 50%, maybe 70% of the time, because I'm not doing the kind of work where it's necessary. That said, all these tools are absolutely awesome. Motherfucker. Zuriel, I run a few campaigns at the moment. I've kept my magic shop consistent between them. Half because I'm lazy and also because my players love it. It has caused a lot of talk in my groups as to what the deal is. Why would the same vendor appear in different worlds in different settings? I think that has a tremendously cool potential for player interest, but also for world or universe development. It does raise that really interesting point, right? Is this magic shop extra-planar? Is the wizard, sorcerer, crafter, artificer, whoever is doing the work, are they an extra-planar being, or do they have extra-planar abilities? So I think that's a super cool idea, Zuriel, as a way of building depth, building interest. And I don't necessarily think that it's lazy, because at the end of the day, you could have the same magic shop that you've designed, laid out, developed. You could have exactly the same NPC. And if you made 3 simple tweaks with the name of the shop, the name of the primary shop owner, and add or subtract assistants, you will have given your players a shop that they think is essentially new and different than the ones that they've seen before. So maintaining those things means that they're going to end up having this really neat experience of, is this a cross-world, cross-planar being that's running this place? And that then leads them to think about, well, what else could I get from this person? Do they have tools? Do they have spells? Do they have artifacts that I might not be able to find in this world or on this plane? But if I do a job for them, maybe they can grant me access to something that I wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. I think that's a really cool and interesting idea. Pim often uses some of the characters I play in other campaigns as NPCs when I DM myself. allows me to be a bit more involved as a DM without adding a DM played character to the party. I agree, Pim. I'm not a huge fan of DMPCs unless you have a party of very new players or a party that is really under 4 characters if they're relatively new, or under 3 characters if they are really experienced, right? I think a 3-character party of experienced characters, particularly if they have a few levels underneath them, not just experienced players, but experienced characters, can work just fine. I think that where you get into some problems is if you don't sort of have a handful of basic skills. Basic casting abilities, basic healing abilities are obviously the 2 big ones that I think you need to make sure you have in a party. So if you're running a super small party, or you are running a party of utter novices, then I think that, to your point that you just threw in there, right? It works as a mentor thing, but you don't want them to rely on it too much. Absolutely, because you as a DM are going to end up metagaming on your own a little bit more than you necessarily want to, right? So, all right, so we've got a road, we've got a little bit of basic gravel here. I like motherfucker. We're gonna see how long this game continues, Zuriel, because you're gonna be really hammered really soon if we keep this up. It's also going to just begin annoying me, so we may turn that game off at 10 a.m. and play something different for the second hour if I'm trying to control my use of random stupid words. Cross throws a morning, Cross. I've had NPCs join the party for short periods of time during my campaign of 7 PCs just for story reasons. Yes, I think that makes perfect sense. I think having an NPC who collaborates with the party makes a lot of sense, and who is there to mentor a character, to provide a plot hook, to lead the characters through a particular set of challenges that they might not otherwise be ready for. That makes perfect sense. I think that is different in my mind than a true DMPC. So Sarah had thrown something earlier in chat asking whether or not we're going to see a version of a certain stone reading cowboy in this campaign as an NPPC. You are very likely, it's certainly possible that you might see him show up. The character, I'll just talk about it. The character that Sarah is talking about is one that I played in the campaign in which she and I met, and I absolutely love him. I would love to play him again. I think he's a super neat character. That said, will he make an appearance here in his current or different form? I don't know. He exists in this world somewhere. Where he exists, I don't really know yet, but he's out there someplace, and all y'all may run into him. So, good towns need water sources, right? So when we're designing towns, we need to, I like to anchor things in reality to some degree. And what leads us to stop? If you have done any kind of backpacking or backcountry camping, there are some things that you are always going to look for in a place that you are going to set up camp. Water is one of them, right? We think about survival in the real world, and this is one where, for those of you who are fans of psychology, I think the idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs can be a really informative one that can help with world building. The first thing that Maslow details out is that we have physiological needs. Now, Maslow's an interesting dude. His work is dated, and which is understandable. He began publishing in the 40s, but the 1940s. But it still is, it very much speaks to sort of that humanistic psychology thing, right? So we need water, we need air, we need access to shelter. And I refer to some of those as the acute needs that we have. We can only last for a very short period of time without air, water, and some sort of thermoregulation. When we're out in the wilderness, those are the things we think about. First, I need air. If I can't breathe, then nothing else matters. This is why drowning takes precedence over things like wanting to read a book. If I can breathe, then the next thing I need to worry about is thermal regulation. I can go for probably 24 hours without being in a hypercritical survival situation from a water standpoint, as long as I have some ability to regulate myself in terms of the atmosphere, which is why one of the first things that you do in a survival situation is that you create some sort of shelter. Then you start worrying about water. As Pim points out, if you don't have water in your town, it's going to be very hard to stay there for any period of time. So you either need to be on a lakefront, on a stream, on a creek that has clean, potable water, or you need to be able to dig a well. Wells take time, wells take industry, so you are very likely to start out close to some natural body of water. When I create towns, I tend to think of either running water, rivers, creeks, things like that, or I think about lakes. The important thing to remember sort of geologically about lakes is that lakes are not permanent geological presences. They almost all are ephemeral, even if they are not ephemeral in a time scale that we care about. I'm just going with now at times, Zuriel. We're just going to have to live with it for the rest of the stream. You can drink as much as you want. I'm going to try and minimize it, but I'm going to stop saying motherfucker every time I do it. So, I like to start with water. I also like to, again, give it some interest. It's not at all uncommon that you're going to have gravel or some sort of excavation. People have chucked rocks into the water. Maybe the water's been worn away just by erosion. So I will go ahead and use my gravel tool here just to add some dynamism to the water. It's pretty. It's interesting. So Cross brings up a good point that in a D&D setting, the water and food requirements can both be met through other means. Magical is often one of them. However, it is less likely, in my mind, that a town will have sprung up depending upon that sort of resource, because it has some limits to it at lower levels, and you have to ask yourself, why would a high-level wizard decide, or cleric or sorcerer, any sort of caster who has the ability to make food or make water, why would they have chosen to stop and set up a town here? So I think for the purposes of starting with a simple town setup, having some sort of water makes sense. So with that in mind, we start getting into, so we've got water. We've identified already that there's a natural source of water in the form of this creek that runs through, and then there's a little bit of a lake that is formed. There's no good way to show topography, I find, in DungeonDraft. You can do it a little bit better in WonderDraft, but again, I'm using DungeonDraft here for some particular reasons. Mostly the ability to export it directly into Foundry if I want to use this setting. So in this case, I've got a lake that has been created in some way, either by erosion or by man-made digging that opens up a reservoir, essentially, right? This is less of a natural lake and more of a created reservoir that enables our characters who are our NPCs who populate the town to have access to water. So now, what are some things that we're going to have? Well, we're going to have some buildings, right? Because we said that shelter is incredibly important. In the basic version of DungeonDraft, again, this is a no asset packs version, so this is stuff that anybody can do just by getting the software. Once again, not sponsored software, just something that I'm using. We can pick our wall type. We can pick various things. So I think that cobble is what we're going to start with, because a lot of times the initial buildings that you see in towns are either going to be found rock, found cobble, or they are going to be more of your log cabin style type building with wooden walls. For now, our initial building, we're going to go ahead and create with just a simple cobble wall, simple, what do we want to do for a floor here? Cobble floor. This is where we start getting into what we want things to look like. I'm probably not going to do carpet or concrete. I am going to go ahead and say a wood floor for the simple reason that I like it. I think it looks good. So starting with just a simple, if we go with traditional 5x5 sizing, we would think that an early settler would probably build a relatively small building. So I'm going to go ahead and go with this 10x15 cobble shack. Now I want to do some work, so I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit. Well, what are some other things that we're going to need? Well, obviously we're going to need some sort of door, because people have to come and go from a building. We are going to want some sort of window. This is interesting. In the newest update of DungeonDraft, there are some more assets here. This is fun. I haven't used the newest version. I had just downloaded it recently. So I like the shuttered windows, I think, in this case. And we're going to go ahead and put our windows sort of opposite our door. Why would we put the windows opposite the door? It gets a little bit of airflow, but it still keeps the building relatively protected from the environment, right? So I've got some basic portals now. So I've got space, I've got some basic portals. I want to go ahead and start throwing in objects. One of the things that DungeonDraft allows you to do in its simplest form is place objects in your space. Let me take a quick scroll back through here. Anything interesting that I ought to comment on? Cross is doing a nice job of talking about some magic stuff. I do think that that decanter of endless water is a really neat idea. Cross. Him, yeah, for sure. Towns are generally not more than about a day's walk apart in general. If not a day's walk, then certainly a day's travel by horse. You would expect to find either some sort of settlement or some sort of water source. Those, I think, are very common expectations. An hour goes quick, gang. I was shooting for a 2-hour stream this morning. We may get a whopping one building built in 2 hours. So what are some things that I want? Well, I probably want some type of cooking ability, right? Some kind of fireplace. Shelter, we also need the ability to have a place to cook, a place to keep ourselves warm. It is likely that we are going to have that in the space. I am going to drop the scale on this down a little bit to scale it to the building itself. I am going to go ahead and rotate it and put it on this far wall. Now you see, if I leave snap on, that I'm stuck either placing it out in the middle of these squares or right in the middle of the wall, which obviously I don't want to do. So I'm going to start by taking snap off and doing that. Now, I also feel like this building would have a chimney. So I could duplicate this, just turn it 90 degrees and sort of use the same style as my chimney. Instead, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull another fireplace into play. I'm going to scale it down, get it close. I'm going to rotate it 180. No, I'm not going to rotate it 150. I'm going to rotate it -90, which should flip it around. Same thing, and I'm just going to back it up. And now I can zoom it into the wall if I want, and it now has that sort of look of being a bit of a... It looks like a chimney to me. Nothing fancy, nothing crazy. Again, the idea here is that we want to give our players something visually interesting to interact with the environment and give ourselves some anchors. All of this could be done in Theater of the Mind. But as we get into play, I think it's relevant that we would have some of these things. Well, what else are you going to have in this building? You're probably going to have a bed of some sort, right? So I'm going to go with it's a small space. I'm going to go with a single bed as opposed to some kind of camp bed. We're going to go ahead and rotate this as well. And we'll probably scale it up just a little bit. Let's make it, let's go to 0.5 on the scale. I think that's reasonable. 5 by 5. It's a little small for the space if we were going to be super realistic. So that's better. I'm going to move it over in the corner here, even though I probably would have it close to a window. But from that point, let's just go ahead and throw in another window, right? We'll throw in another portal, building tool, portal tool. We'll throw in another window here. And same thing. The nice thing with windows is that they will auto-rotate to fit wherever you want and snap to your wall without it being too big of a deal. So I'm going to go ahead and throw a window here, right? So our early settler wants to have their bed by a window. They want to have a fireplace where they can cook and whatnot. What are some other things that they are very likely going to have in their space? Well, they're probably going to have some kind of chest or crate or something else where they can keep some material. At some point, they may want to have a chessboard, but for now, we're going to use just a real simple chest, not chess. We're going to rotate that. We're going to give that a -90 rotation as well so that the hasp is facing out into the room. I'm going to scale it down a bit so that it fits the space. And that to me makes more sense than something like a dresser or anything like that. Yeah, I think that works. So I'm going to go with that. That's going to be this settler's initial space. I also think that we would have some sort of garden bed because we want to be able to harvest some crops, right? Even in a world in which agriculture has not yet developed. And that's another thing to think about in world design is sort of the timeline of technological development. And this is something actually that Pim and I are going to get into in a stream at some point. Pim has a background in history and art history that I think is super interesting. Again, excuse me. But just think about history, right? Think about how societies develop. You are going to want to set up your location, right? You're the first explorer, the first traveler that has found this place. You're going to cobble together some sort of shelter for yourself, probably a very temporary sort of shelter at first, and then begin building a nicer, more permanent type structure. In that process, you're also probably going to want to be able to cultivate some food for yourself. You're not just going to want to hunt and gather. So it would be reasonable to say that you would have some sort of garden beds. Now, for our purposes, we're going to say that this garden bed is going to be something that's developed over time. So it's a little more formal at this point. We've gone ahead and created some permanent bedding spaces. What's another thing that you're going to need? Well, everybody poops, right? There's a really nice book called Everybody Poops. I highly recommend it for all of you. But another thing that we want to think about is that in our initial town building example, two things occur, right? You don't shit where you eat, and you don't want to shit near your water source. It's also if you're going to establish a longer period of time and you're probably going to make some kind of formal latrine space. But it's not necessarily going to be super fancy. It's not going to be super nice. You're probably not necessarily going to cobble it. So we're going to go ahead and just drop in a very simple outhouse type space. That is, we don't want windows necessarily. I mean, in real life, you'd probably want some kind of event, right? But for now, we're just going to throw a door here. And I'm going to throw a door there. We're going to drop back over to objects. We're going to find our toilet. What's fun about searching for stuff in this for me is that I don't spell well. So we're going to throw a little privvy in here. I don't imagine that the seat would be 5 by 5, so we're going to scale that down by about half. I don't know about you, but I do not need that large of a space to poop. But we'll go ahead and throw an outhouse in here. Now, would this change in time? Sure. Is this something that's necessarily going to show up in the campaign the way it is now? No, but to me, it's an interesting space. Cross brings up a good point. This is a relatively small, though permanent space, right? It is, we have it set up as a 10 by 15, 150 square foot living space. That is a reasonable sized bedroom. That would be a big bedroom in my house. I do not live in a large house. Most of my bedrooms are more like 125 square feet, but in a large house, that would be a small bedroom. That would be a small kid's bedroom. But if you are the first settler or one of the first settlers cobbling together a permanent structure, to build a space that is 150 square feet would take you a good deal of time, a good deal of effort. And to Cross's point, it's the sort of thing that you would build with the idea that for the most part, you're going to be outside of the space and things like that. I agree, Cross, that we're probably going to have a fire pit of some sort because it is the kind of thing that you would have started with. Building a fire is something that you would have done in time, but you probably would have started with an outdoor fire pit because you've probably built your permanent structure near or around the temporary structure that you started with. So we can go ahead and throw the fire in the fire pit just because I think it's nice. Chairs and tables, absolutely. Inside, you would absolutely have a chair because you're not going to only sit on your bed. You're probably going to craft yourself some sort of simple wooden chair so that you can sit by the fire at minimum. Maybe you eventually get to the point where you have a nice fancy chair, but we're going to go ahead and start with a very simple small chair and a small table over here. So the inside of our shelter is, I think, reasonable at this point for somebody who is a solo traveler. To Cross's point, this whole setup says does not have a family. One bed, one chair, one table, one chest, small garden, little outhouse not too far away. This is something where a misanthrope like me has gone to live in the woods by themselves, and over time the world has developed. Hey Mike, how are you this morning? Welcome. Thanks for joining in. I want to scroll back up and see if I missed anything important or interesting in chat. Handing magic items out. I think handing magic items out is an interesting thing because you can hand a magic item out early in a game that your players don't know is a magic item. Unless they have a caster that has Identify Magic with them, they are going to find, let's say, a +3 sword and go off into the world with their +3 sword. It's just going to be a sword to them. Unless they've been told it's a magic item or they've cast Identify on it, it's just a sword. And in time, they may discover it's a magic item. So I think that depending upon your party composition and the spells that your casters have chosen, you may be able to get away with dropping a magic item earlier on than you would have otherwise. Something that's interesting that I just figured out is because I'm not talking to anybody else, I probably could take these headphones off, but we're here now, so I guess I'll just keep them on for the time being. Some of you probably think that I'm listening to music. Interestingly enough, just really the little bit of background music that I have going on the stream right now. For anybody who's ever looking for good background music, I just downloaded this morning the Twitch soundtracks thing. I haven't gotten to install it or play with it yet, so soundtrack by Twitch, I guess they call it. But I'm going to play with it at some point here for these streams in particular. I just use Epidemic Sound because it is a low subscription price. I think I pay $15 a month for it, but it automatically links itself to our Twitch channel, to our YouTube channel, and it allows us to get music on our VODs that we can use both in live stream and in VOD without having to worry about stuff dropping out. Don't worry, Cross, I'm not going to jump into it tomorrow. Well, I might jump into it tomorrow, but I'm not going to jump into it today, and it'll get tested out and played with before I jump into it. I don't understand why you wouldn't all want to be listening to lo-fi beats while we talk and build a town, but whatever. I'm here to keep the people happy. So that's actually not true at all. I don't mind keeping people happy, but it is a thing. We can talk later about it, Cross. I know that it gets into some issues with VODs and things like that because it doesn't carry over, which isn't necessarily something that bothers me. I'm sure you have other really good reasons as well. You think about this stuff quite a bit. So, all right, so let's go ahead and say that our wandering misanthrope has established his or her presence here. They have set up a home. They now find that there are travelers coming by. Travelers see water. They see a person who's already there, and we have demonstration of social value. Human beings are pack animals. We are social creatures. There are tons of really interesting books about this. One that I read a few years ago that I think is really worth time if you want to explore the idea just a little bit is a book called Social. I believe the author is Matthew Lieberman. It is on a bookshelf over there, so I'm not going to spend time running over to grab it to show it to you, but it's an interesting book. If anybody wants to Google it and throw it in chat, Cross, that would be a great thing if you feel like looking for it. I believe it's Matthew Lieberman. People might be interested in it. Once again, no affiliate links. We don't. I just talk about stuff that I have paid my own money for and like. So if you're interested in it, we are all about social value. So if one person has stopped here and built themselves some sort of vaguely permanent presence, then it's really likely that other people are going to do that same thing. But we don't know how social our misanthrope is. Cross, I said if you had a chance to Google the book Social by Matthew Lieberman and throw a link in chat if anybody wanted to check it out. I believe everybody has the capacity to Google or Bing, I guess, if you want to Bing. I am using Google in its metonymic sense, the way we use the word Kleenex. But so let's say that now somebody else comes along, they talk to our misanthrope, they get the idea that maybe they would be vaguely welcome here, but they're not going to set up right next door. They're going to build their home a little ways away. And maybe we're far enough along that the people who are traveling have brought, hey, Magnus of Thor, welcome, good morning, thanks for jumping in. Happy to have you here. So maybe they are looking for, maybe they've brought materials with them. Maybe they set out, hey, John. Maybe they have set out to find a place. They've set out to build a place. Thanks for the link, Cross. Our misanthrope isn't entirely thrilled with the idea of having a neighbor, but they're by themselves. They're not going to fight it out, but they're probably not going to build homes right next to one another. They're going to carve out a little bit of space. So our other settler has brought some materials with them. So they are going to build a little bit bigger space. I'm going to undo this because I actually do want to snap to grid here for argument's sake. So they're going to build a little bit bigger home. They're going to build a home that's maybe... All right, I like 25 by 15. That's a big enough space for Zuriel. Enjoy some food, trying to probably recover from the number of shots that you've done keeping up with my placeholder verbalizations. Enjoy your campaign tonight. Thanks for jumping in. We'll see you the next time you get a chance. So same thing. What are we going to have here in this home? We're going to have some windows. We might have a few more windows because this person brought material with them. We need a door of some sort. So now, 25 by 15 home, not unreasonable to be a small family home for a small number of settlers. Everybody say hello to Magnus of Thor / John in chat. John is the GM/DM for my Thursday home group. We are currently playtesting a variant rule set for a D&D-like campaign that we had been... So this is the group that had been playing Basic Fantasy Rules RPG set, which I've talked about before for folks who are looking for a 1E, 2E clone that uses an Ascending Armor class system. I liked and continue to like Basic Fantasy Rules RPG. It's free, it's open source, you can download it, people don't have to go and buy books. But it's interesting, I liked it. It was fun to play. John has been fiddling around with some neat ideas to play test some new rule sets and some new rule systems that streamline the process, drive the game more towards being a RP game and less math crunchy. So we just had our first session with it on Thursday night, and we're starting to get our feet under us with learning it and figuring it out. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. So thanks for jumping in, John. All right, so once again, we need a fireplace, right? Shelter, warmth, the ability to cook food. All of these things are important. This person brought things with them. They probably have a few more resources than our initial misanthrope. They also came with a family, so they are going to need to have a little bit more space for cooking. So they're going to have their cooking fire. They also are going to want a chimney. Once again, I am not a huge fan of using brick in this setting because brick is a technology that you wouldn't necessarily haul around with you. But you'd have some sort of chimney, right? So we have that thrown in there. Hey, Chris! Welcome aboard. Thanks for jumping in. Another one of my fellow players. So I will throw this out here for those of you who are in that were part of our playtest auditions. Chris's character is Gaji. So the mouse-loving and vision-having cleric who inspired our setting for our playtest campaigns. And we, in fact, when we were playing initially, we were using the Temple of Elemental Evil module that we ended up using for those playtest sessions. So that that all came about because of the interaction of that group. So it's super awesome to have both of you, John and Chris, jumping in to join today. So I appreciate you stopping by and hanging out for a little bit. So what else do we need? Well, we need a bed, right? Family's going to have a bed, a little bit bigger bed because it is a family. Let's go ahead and say that mom and dad like to sleep between the window. This is a very standardized, heteronormative family. Mom and dad have a child. However, mom and dad are also sort of the opinion that children don't necessarily need to have fancy spaces. They sort of have to earn their keep in the world. So they're... Do we want it to be a son or a daughter? Somebody make a roll and tell me if they have a son or a daughter in this case. Indoor hammock for the kids. I like it, Cross. We're actually going to go ahead and do that. Let's undo. And do I have a hammock in this? I think I can search for it, though. The fun part about searching for me is having to spell, because it is not something that I am any good with. So Mike says that they have a daughter, so I'm good with that. So they are going to have a daughter. The daughter's hammock is going to hang between these two walls so that it's a reasonably decent anchor point. She's got a little bit of ventilation, not too far from the door, but they get to have a little bit of that. So we're going to need a little bit bigger table this time for the family. I think that they would have perhaps brought a nice enough table with them, and they probably like the idea of having some sort of cover on it, so they keep a reasonably clean home. They have gone ahead and given themselves a very simple runner. We're going to go ahead and turn this 90, and it's just the three of them, so they are going to use the three sides of the table. That's decent. Couple of chairs. Same thing. We'll go ahead. We'll use our very simple chairs. I'm fine with the sizing. There are other ways to manipulate stuff in DungeonDraft and WonderDraft. I just sort of go in and throw numbers or use sliders. It's just the way I like to do it. In this case, I'm going to use a slider because we'll say that they leave a little bit of space there to get away from that. We're going to go ahead and need a... We're going to need a chest. But these folks... I'm going to use a treasure chest. I don't necessarily know that when our friendly neighborhood adventurers show up that the family will have any treasure. Again, this is not the village of Hamlet, so they aren't necessarily going to have detailed information for all of the PCs about where everybody keeps their gold. I'm going to assume that the players, if they actually show up here, aren't going to be looting every single person they come across. They might, though. Don't know. So we'll see. So we've got a very simple, modest home, but a little bit larger, right? We're gonna say that they've set up here because it gets them away from... I don't want to drop another chest. So we're going to say that they have set up here because it gets them away from the misanthrope a little bit, who maybe is going to end up not being quite so misanthropic as time goes on. We'll see what happens. They're close enough to the water that it's not a terrible walk, right? They're 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. 55 feet from the creek, which is a completely reasonable distance to go ahead and walk to get your water. Again, excuse me, very burpy today. But they are also going to want some sort of a privy. I'll turn that off. Let's go ahead and snap to grid again. Zoom in. So they are also going to want a privy because everybody poops. Small family, they do not need multiple toilets. So this is, once again, a very simple home, very simple style, but they're a little bit fancier. So they go ahead and use a cover over their privy so that if they need to put any sort of food item in there to get it away from animals and whatnot, they can. So they have a lid to go on their privy. That is also something, you know, we're talking about history. I gotta undo that. Undo. That is also something that is very accurate to the universe that we live in. People do go and use the privy as a place to secure food. It's also, fun fact for those of you who are campers, hikers, backpackers, if you are ever finding yourself in a state park, national park, any type of developed space in a terrible location to eat because of wind, a blockhouse style pit toilet works just fine to make food. Cross, I agree that from a aromatics standpoint, this privy is probably a little too close to the house, but I have also been in several very rustic communities that had outhouses where it was not that much far of a walk to get there. I have definitely been at places that the privy was less than 20 feet from the outside wall of the building. So I'm going to go with it. I'm going to make a ruling here. However, this family showed up and they have some livestock, right? They showed up, they had a wagon, they had some horses, so they are very likely to have cultivated a little bit of space for the horse. And for argument's sake, we're going to say that the horse is penned mostly around the back of the building, which means we probably have a little bit more dirt back here, right? Horses trotted a lot of this down. We've trotted a path to the privy that's a little more common than what the misanthrope will have. Bump the brush up a little bit here. But a little bit of space for our horses. Pim, enjoy the walk. See you in a few minutes. So with that, we're going to go ahead and probably throw up some simple fences. You do not want your... I don't have fence? Really? That seems odd. Let's see here. Let's go jump over to tags and see what exists under tags. Structure, table. Go with horse. Do we want to be terrible and say that they didn't do a good job feeding the horse? That seems rude. So we're going to say that this horse has managed to survive long enough, but the horse probably needs water, right? So, oh, there's bound to be some kind of a fountain, right? Fountains, I think, work well for this. Little watering trough. Keep the horse happy. Chris, the horse's name is Reginald. Reginald was actually born as a very wealthy noble in the family of... what family name do I want to give him? Brunsdrail. So Reginald Brunsdrail was a wealthy nobleman who ended up angering a very powerful wizard, and that wizard used true polymorph to turn Reginald into a horse, and then sold Reginald to a stable as a beast of burden, and just to get some money, right? So our horse has been sold and now finds himself trapped in the body of a horse. So Reginald is now trapped in the body of a horse and has been bought by this family. And they are... I'm going to actually make a note of this because I'm going to lose Reginald the horse if I don't make a note about this. Reginald B. the horse. Reginald has been true polymorphed and is stuck in his horse form, now having drug a wagon for this family to... Let's look for a cart. Apparently wagons only have wreckage. It's kind of a small cart. I'm going to use the minecart just because I think it looks nice. I'm going to blow its scale up a little bit so that it looks more wagon-like. It's probably a little big for Reginald to drag by himself. That'll probably wear him out. Let's go ahead and drop that to 1 1/4. I like that. Reginald can haul that. For the most part, the family probably would have alternated walking alongside and guiding Reginald. This isn't so much level... this isn't so much a... What do I want to say? So much a wagon train type cart as it is a way that they hauled some of their initial materials to get here. We're probably gonna park the cart up against the house. Keep it close. Let's rotate it the other way to make it easier for them to hitch Reginald up. We'll stick it over here. It's not too hard to get over by the privy to grab it. So... Reginald the horse has a cart that he has hauled for this family over here. Need some kind of fencing, right? Only seems reasonable. Why can't I search for fence as a tag? You would think fencing exists. It would help if I spelled it right. I told y'all I do not spell well. Is not in my skill set. Bench. Bench is not fence. What else we want to try here? Floating fire, corpse, crime, skeleton, stairs. Let's see what we got in stairs. Maybe there's something we can make use of in stairs. Not really. John, I think Reginald has developed a sense of learned helplessness at this point. He was initially quite rebellious, but like so many rebellious horses, because as we know in our world, all horses are in fact true polymorphed nobles. And the reason that wild horses are so rebellious is because they are still aware of their true polymorph state and are attempting to get themselves out of that condition. However, as happens all so often in our world, through the act of domestication and breeding, we break the spirit of the wild, true polymorphed horse, and it finds itself in a state of learned helplessness where all it can do is resign itself to its circumstances and do all that it can to not suffer unduly, finding itself happy, so to speak, and even perhaps convinced that it is happy. It's a sad, sad existence to be a polymorphed horse. What is interesting about Reginald, I find, is that in his staring off into the distance, his longing for his former life, he chooses to contemplate how he might elicit one of these player characters, one of these adventurers, to engage and come with and help free him from this bondage that he has incurred. As Cross said, a low-level adventurer, a apprentice adventurer at level 5 may have the ability to dispel polymorph, and the hope is, Reginald's everlasting hope is that that is what will come to pass. Alas, thus far in Reginald's existence, it has not been so. Could you, as the adventurer, be the one who eventually helps Reginald be released from his bondage? It's curious. And more importantly, why? Why has the mage, the caster, who initially chose to polymorph Reginald, why has he done this? Is Reginald a victim? Has Reginald been served his proper comeuppance? Only time will tell whether or not that is the case. It is a case. I don't know. I don't know what we will find yet for Reginald and his adventures. Only time will tell. So, where are we at now? We've got a... Sorry, that's zooming quite a bit, but we'll go there. All right, so our town has begun to take shape. We have our misanthrope's hut not too far from the river and this small reservoir-like area. We have the family hut that has appeared and is now being occupied by this mother and father and their daughter, and the polymorphed horse Reginald, who, it should be noted, the family does not know is a polymorphed human in the form of a horse. Because while they do make their child live in a hammock, they choose to believe that families have very rigid structures, they consider themselves to be reasonably good people, neutral good as many humans are, and they would feel very conflicted about the idea of keeping Reginald in this form if they knew that this was the case. Would they automatically release him from this form? Probably not. I mean, after all, they paid for him, right? And they have this situation where I've paid for him, right? So I've got a sunk cost fallacy. If I free the horse, now I am exposing myself to economic ruin because a family with this sort of resources has probably dropped a significant amount of gold to acquire this horse to begin with. So to release the horse from bondage means having to make a real financial sacrifice. And we know historically that that is something that human beings, even though they consider themselves to generally be good, may not do, right? Where do we go from there? It's an interesting question, but we now have a further demonstration of social value, right? This town is now taking form, it's taking shape, because we no longer have one person, our misanthrope, screaming in the darkness. We now have a small community developing, a place of relative safety. If two sets of people are able to live here and cultivate, we should probably give this family some sort of garden space that is outside of Reginald's fenced-in pen, because as a horse who longs for his freedom, we know that he would rush away if need be. But we will go ahead and give this family some very simple garden beds. Is it likely that they would also have these within a fenced-in area? Maybe they would. I don't really care, so they're not going to. So, Matt, it's entirely possible that Reginald has been punished for previous misdeeds. We just don't know yet why Reginald has found himself in this state of being polymorphed into a horse and now in bondage to this otherwise really nice family. Mike, we don't know where this is yet. This is a random town that has sprung up. I'm refreshing my coffee. This is a random town that has sprung up for the purposes of us having a conversation and doing some world building and some story building this morning. So I don't know yet where it's going to appear in the world. At some point, I mean, what the hell? We've gone this far to go ahead and do all this. We probably are. I'm gonna drop it in for sure. It is entirely possible that Reginald as well gets, that the tale of Reginald, will get told. We just don't know. I am going to take a second, because we've had a bunch of people jump in and move away from this for a second and go back to making sure that I've caught up on chat, as well as share with all of you some cool stuff that has happened this week. And we hit affiliate, which is super amazing. We also are currently sitting in the top 2% of Twitch channels, which is baffling to me. It is absolutely insane that we have hit this level already. And obviously, being a smaller and newer channel, it is a super cool thing. Time will tell whether or not we are able to continue to maintain the growth that we have. But I had mentioned earlier to folks that if you take a look in our chat, that we already have unlocked 2 emotes. We have our Owlbear attack and our loving flump emote that have been unlocked because we have hit 21 subscribers. We're 4 subscribers away from unlocking our 3rd emote. So far, we have 4 emotes already in our they're already created, ready to be uploaded whenever Twitch allows us to use them. They generally have been activating them really quickly once we upload them. It's been pretty nice. I know folks who had hit affiliate status back in summer and through October were having to wait sometimes a few days, a week and a half, sometimes longer to get emotes approved. And personal opinion, I have nothing to back this up. It's purely speculation. I think it's probably because, if everybody remembers, that was when all of the DMCA takedown notices from the RIAA were hitting really hard. So assuming that Twitch is a smaller operation as far as humans having their hands on approval stuff, it makes complete sense to me that it took them just a little while to get back to being on a good pace of developing and getting things published and approved. But fortunately, right now, that seems to be no longer be a problem. So we are getting things knocked out of the park there. So our emotes are getting approved super quickly. For those of you who are subscribers to the channel, you are also able to use those emotes over on our Discord server. So it's pretty cool. It's really neat. I'm super excited about it. And again, really, really grateful for everybody who is following and subscribing and gifting subs. We're already up to 15 gifted subs, which is super cool as well. So all of that I find just it's neat. It's cool. I appreciate it. I think it's great of all of you who are jumping in and helping out. So let's scroll back up here, see if there's anything else that I need to work into Reginald's backstory. I think right now Reginald is in a good place, so we can go ahead and return to some crafting. So what comes next? Obviously, we're going to have to build another building. Someone else, having seen the demonstration of social value that these two sets of a family and an individual have decided this is a good spot, they are also likely to stop. Is it possible that this family has sent word back to town that this is a good place? Maybe is it possible that, you know, we started with this dirt road being pretty well developed. It's likely that it wouldn't have been this developed already. It probably would have started off as a simple 2-track sort of thing and then expanded over time. But for argument's sake, we're still going to say that it is a relatively plain road, even though it may be at a status that would otherwise have been unlikely for... I don't want to do that. Undo, building tool, zoom in. So, what do we want now? Well, we probably need to go ahead and build some other buildings. Now, you may ask yourself, Chris, then you'd be asking me. You wouldn't be asking yourself, Chris, unless you are one of the couple of people in chat named Chris. But you may be asking yourself, why on earth is he leaving these buildings without roofs when there is a roof tool? And the reason for that is that at some point I would like these buildings to be interactive in a easy to use way. I can build buildings that would not be interactive and throw roofs on them. I probably could figure out how to throw roofs on these buildings and then remove them when I drop things into Foundry, but I'm not going to do that right now. For now, we're just going to go ahead and leave these as unroofed buildings because in Foundry, I like to talk about Foundry a lot because it's the VTT that we're using for the game. Again, no sponsorship, bought and paid for with our own hard-earned money. But one of the reasons that we use it is that Foundry has a token vision option where if doors and windows are closed, the inside of this building will just be a blacked out square. Have a good day, Cross. Thanks for dropping by. Thanks for sharing that link. It made my life easier. So in Foundry, when my players interact with this setting, they will not be able to see into these buildings until they open a door or open a window. So I don't really need to worry about having roof structures on there. If I was going to design a space that I didn't want people to interact with, I probably could throw roofs on them, but this works for now, which is one of the reasons why I'm putting doors and windows in and stuff like that, is that people will be able to interact with it. So, with that said, let's build something more. Let's go ahead and look at building another house. We'll probably just do another simple house because if one family comes through and stops, probably another family is going to come through and stop. And they're going to go ahead and they don't like the idea of people walking. This new family doesn't like the idea of people walking through their yard to get to the creek. They are interested in being closer to the water. Maybe it's I'm going to say it is a family, a larger family that has sort of a multi-generational component going on. So there is a grandmother and grandfather who are part of this family, and as a result, they are being sort of, I mean, it's still a but a low technology society, more of a rural setting. So grandma and grandpa are mobile enough that they are going to be expected to help contribute to the family's efforts with things like water gathering, tending the fire, stuff like that, some basic gardening. But because of their age and perhaps at some point infirmity, we want to keep them a little bit closer to the water. So this family is going to choose to build a home over here. I want to go back to snap to grid function. They are going to build themselves a home because they're a bigger, more blended family, and they've chosen to be here for reasons. They are going to build a little bit more interesting space. One of the things I like about DungeonDraft is that by simply doing this kind of click and add, you can add additional rooms and spaces that sort of give you a ability to make some changes there. The other thing that you can do is you can edit points, which is nice because you may not want a perfectly square or perfectly round building. So let's say, for argument's sake, that this family, they had a little bit more wealth. They wanted a little bit nicer house. And that's nice. I like that. So Chris, yeah, with this, you can use the grid if what you want is your standard sort of 5x5 space for a battle map feel. And then if you want to drop it into more of an outdoor map that would use a hex grid, there are different overlay options. Let's see here. That's somewhere in here. There is an overlay option. So I can change the grid color here. I don't believe I can change. Well, I should probably save this before we lose it. So we're going to call this Reggie. Reggie's map. Let's save. Save Reggie's map. But I don't believe I can change the... Yeah, I don't believe I can change it to a hex grid on here. However, if I drop it into a program like my VTT, or if I were to take this, export the image, right? Export it as a PNG and move it over to WonderDraft, which is a world mapping tool, then I can absolutely enable a hex grid option and use that functionality there. So it does have some neat ideas. Keep me fed and I'll protect you person. Sure, I think in many cases that that is often the case, Mike, when it comes to generational families. Sometimes you maintain those connections not out of a sense of love or appreciation, but sheerly out of a sense of obligation, which was a very common thing and still is, right? People do a lot because they feel obligated to, whether it is reasonable or not. Now, this family has a little more money, so they have some nicer shutters. They don't have just a simple board and batten shutter. We're going to say that that's a little bit nicer shutter. So they have gone ahead and given themselves a little bit bigger living space. Made some room. They also have sort of the idea that in general, the family needs just a basic space. John, I like the idea of them having a porch. So we're going to say that because of their opulence, they have chosen that they will have a front porch space. Haha. That's not what I wanted. I don't want to snap. They want a front porch space. A little bit of room where they can go ahead and spend time out of the dirt and the mud. Because sooner or later, dirt and mud is going to be a function of real life. However, they're also not that great at carpenters. So it's not perfect. Okay? This family is very fancy. They also have a back door. And they are going to mom and dad, because again, this is a heteronormative couple. Mom and dad want a small room of their own. The kids and grandma and grandpa get to live in this space, but mom and dad want their own space, right? Because sometimes you want to make the boot scoot boogie and don't want to be in with everybody else. So I don't know if that's what the kids call it these days, but that's apparently what I decided to call it. So mom and dad need a bed. And because we are no longer going to call it the boot scoot boogie, because that was stupid. But we are going to use a disheveled bed. That's a little too big. We're going to use a slightly disheveled bed because mom and dad like to fuck. So mom and dad have a bit of a disheveled bed. They like to make the dragon with two backs. As John likes to say, perhaps they actually are dragons who have chosen to polymorph into humans because for some reason they are compelled to keep an eye on Reginald. How do you spell chest, Chris? C-H. Okay. Now, they have a little bit more money, a few more resources. That's a little too big. A few more resources. So they have a little bit larger of a treasure chest to eat, maintain themselves, keep their lifestyle going. They also are going to do some basic gardening to supplement the hunting and gathering that they would otherwise do. They maintain this space closer to the river and off to the side here. So we'll go ahead and say that their garden is over on this side of the building. Few more people, so they've got a little more space. They also are interested in having a fence, however, because they are concerned about people showing up. What the hell did I use before for a fence? Anybody remember what on earth I used to make a fence? Wasn't clutter. Cage. Nope. Camp. Should have made a note of what I used. Let's just go back and find it. I don't like that fence for them. We'll do something different. Well, see, Chris, the important thing with keeping Reginald in line is that he has some sort of power that we don't yet understand, which in fact makes him quite a threat. That is very lucky, or very much the reason why he has found himself in this polymorph state, is that he is in fact trapped there by virtue of the danger that he poses to the world. Now, the dragons here, the polymorph dragons who live in this home with a family that believe they are in fact humans. The children are adopted and the grandparents are actually human slaves who have been bound to the dragons, and now in their dotage continue their efforts to assist and keep the dragons healthy until these adopted children can grow and mature and reach an age where they can themselves be used as servants and are beholden to their polymorphed dragon masters. So it is this is a town in which a lot of deceitfulness comes to be. John, you're right. They certainly could, in fact, be some sort of otherwise ancient dragons, the grandparents, that is, who are ensuring that their... I want that to be 90. Who are in part of the long-going family. I think I may, rather than call this town anything to do with Reginald, while the scene may be titled Reginald's Big Adventure, I think we may actually call the adventure that's going to happen Weekend at Tiamat's. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. So we need a table because the children and the grandparents are in fact humans, and the dragons behave as though they are humans because they do not want to arouse too much suspicion. What else are they going to need? They're going to have some crates because when they arrived in town, they were brought there by a group of teamsters who have moved them to this town, but they themselves do not worry about maintaining a cart or anything like that. So they are not looking to travel. They are not looking to leave this place. It is their responsibility to, in some respects, ensure that the evil Reginald remains stuck in his polymorph form. And as a result, they have brought many of their goods and necessaries with them. So we've got some crates that they keep outside. We've got some random crates that they use as furniture inside. We are going to say that there are a couple of hammocks hung, mostly for the grandparents. The children are left to sleep on the floor because the dragons don't really care about them a tremendous amount. But the grandparents get they're not going to get a hammock. We're going to let them get a bed. But they've got to sleep in a small bed. They've got to sleep together because the dragons don't really care about all that much warmth because they're dragons. They stay warm themselves. The children get to sleep in a corner there. Pray some more. Thanks for the follow. I apologize if I have absolutely misspelled your name, but that's the case. Let's see. John, is there a cave with a hoard of gold under the big house? I don't know. Maybe there is. So that's only time will tell what we have there. But yeah, so now we have the polymorphed dragons who are maintaining their zealous watch over the evil Reginald, who has been polymorphed into a horse. They are here to ensure that no wayward adventurers turn Reginald back into his true form, unleashing his evil upon the landscape. Rather, they are here to keep him in his place. What's interesting is that they are unaware of the backstory of the misanthrope who originally founded the town. Didn't so much found the town as find himself removed from civilization with a sudden appearance of a town springing up around him. Does he know? Does he understand who these various polymorphed individuals are? What kind of an individual sets out and leaves society and establishes such a permanent, though originally reclusive, location for themselves? Is it a wizard or sorcerer who has traveled out beyond the edges of society to try and spend time in quiet contemplation and study? Is it perhaps a warlock who, doing the bidding of a powerful patron, has left the city to create a space where individuals may choose to settle with the idea that this could one day become a haven for finding other individuals to commit themselves to the patron, either as budding warlocks themselves or perhaps as simply tools? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen there. So originally I was going to cut this off at 11, but I'm actually having an absolute blast. So rather than cutting it off at 11, I am going to keep going. We'll see what happens with Team Reggie versus... We got to come up with a name for the dragons. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to throw on my Be Right Back screen. I'm going to take 3 minutes and... Team Scaly. I like it, John. All right, so we've got Team Reggie versus Team Scaly. So the thing about drinking coffee all morning is that I need to pee. So I am going to throw on the Be Right Back screen, and before the song is over in 3 minutes and 40 seconds, I am going to be back. We're going to spend maybe another 45 minutes or an hour. We're going to flesh out a little bit more about Team Scaly and Team Reggie's backstories, and we are going to go from there. So hang tight. Don't disappear. I will be back very quickly. Pim, enjoy dinner. Everybody hang out. I will be right back after a quick bathroom break. Right. See, back before the music ended. So, I even wash my hands, kids. Once a week, whether you need it or not. I'm kidding. You actually should wash your hands a lot. There's a virus. In addition to the fact that, you know, if you go to the bathroom, you should wash your hands. It's kind of a thing. All right, so what did I miss in chat while I was gone? Imagine these clueless kids that the dragons are supposedly grooming for their own nefarious deeds just so happen to leave the gate unlatched the one time they get out of the house long enough to see what the heck all the hullabaloo is with this damn horse. It isn't, you know, you never know what a kid can do. Just wandering around, going to harvest vegetables. One of the kids who is in this as yet unknown state of being beholden to Team Scaly finds themselves befriending and getting to know the young daughter of the family who has somehow found themselves with Reggie. Again, a family who did not set out to purchase a polymorphed individual, but rather has chosen simply to buy a horse so that they can pursue their own aims. But this family, the family who are Reggie's current owners, their daughter is of course going to attempt to make friends with these other two children, and Team Scaly choosing not to betray who they really are or find themselves somehow in a position of being viewed with suspicion, decide to allow the children enough freedom, enough space that they can go ahead and engage with the daughter of Reginald's owners. I think we need to come up with a name for this family. It's too difficult to continue referring to them as Reginald's owners. So let's look for what kind of family would purchase a horse named Reginald. So here's the way I go ahead and look for names if I'm looking for names. Random fantasy name generator is a pretty cool one. Another thing that I will do is just Google most common surnames in a particular country. So I am going to say that we want to use a Welsh surname for this family. So, well, Jones. Jones is the most common surname in Wales. 170,633 families with the surname Jones. I don't want to go with Jones. I think it's too common. I mean, it's one of the 50 most common names, but it's too common. So let's see what else we have. Let's drop a little further down. Pugh. Pugh is the 45th most common surname in Wales. P-U-G-H. So the Pugh family. All right, so making a note. Pugh family. Reggie's owners. All right. The W spelling of Jones would be a good one as well, John. I like that. So the Pugh family's daughter, Cadence. I don't know. We'll go with Cadence for now. I can always change it. Perhaps they're a family of musicians. So Cadence Pugh becomes friendly with Team Scaly's. I'm actually writing hashtag Team Scaly down. All right, so what kind of... So I assume that this would be that two polymorphed dragons setting out to behave like humans are going to try to maintain a level of being hidden, right? They are trying to maintain a very simple idea of their presence in the world. They don't want to draw attention to themselves in this case with a really sort of ostentatious name. But we're going to go ahead and say that they have chosen the last name Lockery because our friend Lockery subscribed for 3 months a couple of days ago, and they are Lockery's a pretty awesome person. It's a nice name. So Team Scaly are using the last name Lockery. The two dragons are going to... What are two good dragon names? Give me a male and female name that y'all think sounds good with Lockery to name these dragons. Keeping in mind that I have enough players in chat even still that when they see these characters, they may have to be renamed, or who knows, maybe this ends up going into a one-shot or something. Shod. Okay, Shod Lockery. Is Shod the male or the female dragon? Inferni's a little bit too on the nose, I think. But all right, so Shod's the male. Fernie. What else can we do? Fernie. Other. We'll go with Fernie. All right, John. Fernie is the female dragon. So Shod and Fernie Lockery, the The grandparents were going to go ahead and name... I don't want to use another R name, but that was the first thing. I'm going to use Ion. I don't know why, but it sounds cool. Common spelling like the... like in chemistry. So what's another good chemistry name? What's a good chemistry name for a male and or female character somehow related to the Auric is good, John. All right, you're pretty good at this name thing. It's almost like you've played Dungeons and Dragons before. So, Ion and Auric are our two grandparents. We now need the quote-unquote grandparents. We now need the slaves to be the children. This is where we're going to tune to the old Google machine. I also like to use things like, I think, here, let me see if I can add a window capture here so that we can all participate in this together, hoping that I don't absolutely screw this up. I don't want a video capture device. I want a window capture. Window capture, create new. Okay, there we go. So we'll go ahead and just rescale this a little bit so everybody can see what we're looking at here for names, and then I'll just turn this off when we don't want to use it. So, baby names, meaning, meaning slave. We'll start there. We don't have to... That means servant. That's a little bit better. All right. 475 baby names that mean servant. Let's go with boy names first. Sometimes I just scroll. Let's find a... I'm going to go with a P. Parshad. Servant. Nashpal. We'll go with Parshad. Parshad is the boy. Oh, so here's a little plot twist. The grandparents are... no, I'm not going to go with that. I don't like that idea. Never mind. I was going to go with the grandparents being somehow actually the parents of these two enslaved children, and the family name having the responsibility of doing this. Tralione. Tralione will be the girl. Why not? Trelawney. Sorry. All right. So now we can go ahead and turn that window off and get back to our work here. So get rid of that because I don't need it anymore. All right. So we have a nice little start on a town. We have a nice little start on a backstory for the town. We have Shawd and Fernie Lockery, who live in this house here. They are, in fact, dragons who are maintaining a state of polymorph in order to keep tabs on the evil Reginald, who has been polymorphed into a horse to keep him from engaging with the world in his nefarious ways. He has been purchased by and is now the faithful, though emotionally broken steed of the Pugh family. Their daughter, Cadence, is friendly with the Lockery's quote-unquote children, two children who have been brought into eventual servitude to these dragons, Parshad and Trelawney. I'll figure out how to actually pronounce her name eventually. So, this small town has sort of begun to develop, but the reality is, for it to really develop, be fleshed out, become something more, you know, right now, there would end up being a lot of interaction here, and the potential for the potential for people to eventually become wise to this is all too great with such a small town. So we need to have some more people that come into the place and begin to settle. So we now have a couple of families. We have a couple of families. We have the misanthrope who originally set this place out and is now really, really pissed off that everybody has started showing up. But to John's point, it would now be a really reasonable place to establish some sort of general store, tavern, inn. Right? So we're going to go ahead and build that out next. This place is going to be a little bit more substantial, and they want a little bit more space. So they're going to go ahead and move themselves away from the rest of the rabble a bit and are going to establish themselves over here. Because it is a tavern and an inn and a general store, they're going to build a little bit bigger space. So 55 by 25, that's a pretty good sized building for all of this. But the owners here also want a little bit of status. So they are going to make their building to look as though it has sort of these castle-like features. They're not just creating a store, they're really trying to create a brand. And unbeknownst to them, they're in this place where so many problems have occurred or could occur. But unbeknownst to them, that is the case. So instead, they have simply set out to establish a place where travelers can come and rest themselves. They are very likely going to go ahead and have a well, because they came with money, they came with status, they came with resources, and they don't want to have to cross the road. They want to have a bit of a what do you want to say? A bit of a monopoly on water on this side of the road. Yeah, it's entirely possible, Chris, that Reginald is in fact not evil. It's possible that this has been a frame job from the outset, but the story as we thus far know it is that Reginald is in fact somehow an evil and nefarious individual who has been thrust into this place. We don't know yet. Only time will tell. So we're going to need some stairs, because eventually we would build a second floor for both the proprietors and very likely any guests to reside on. So we'll go ahead and say that one of the towers is used as the place for a spiral staircase, because it eats up the least amount of space in comparison to straight stairs. probably need to go ahead. We've got a front door. We're going to go ahead and add a quote-unquote back door. It's really more of a side door right out by the well so that people can go and grab water as needed for cooking. I'm actually not going to put it there. I'm going to go ahead and throw that door on the back side of the building. We'll end up making this the kitchen space over here. So I think I do that to connect. So a smallish kitchen, but reasonable. Not too small. They're probably not going to have a actual door for the kitchen. It'll be more of just an open space threshold that they can come and go with. Just so everybody in chat that is not a member of my Thursday night group understands, the terrible puns are really one of the things that we pride ourselves on, which is why we're not galloping to conclusions too much. So here at the Fast Cat Tavern, how about that there? The Fast Cat Tavern. I'll end up having to give them... all right, fair enough. They're not necessarily terrible, John. Some of them are quite good. Some of them are awful. Right now, we're dealing with only the good ones. We need to go back to the terrain brush. We're going to say that this family has spent some money and actually brought in some limestone. They like the idea of having what feels like a formal, nice spot for people to park their horses. I'm going to replenish my gravel a little bit here because they like the idea of having sort of this border. Makes them feel like their space is a little more formal. Boundaries it a little bit. They feel like they've designated it as their own a little bit. So, all right. So the Fast Cat Tavern is well in play here. We've got stairs that would go upstairs to reach a couple of very simple rooms. It's a small town. It's not a very large space. So it's unreasonable to think that this small of a place would have an inn or tavern that was ready to host, you know, multiple people in their own rooms. I would say probably when we get to the point where we actually build the upstairs of this out, there's probably a room for the proprietors, and there is a second sort of room that would be normally their child's room or children's room, but that they use as sort of a fancy guest quarters. If somebody with money comes through, they basically whip it into shape, kick their kids out, and throw them someplace else. And then there is a giant common room, like John mentions, very Hostel style. Not the movie Hostel, just the concept. But so a single room that would normally have the kids in it, but can very quickly be adapted to be in place for our guest. I'm gonna go back. I just noticed that my floor here is not connected, so I'm gonna grab that and I'm gonna undo that because I didn't want turn the walls off on the whole thing, kids. All right, we'll go back to walls there, and then we're just gonna add some points. That's gonna get deleted. Delete. And I have to re-add windows. All right, I actually feel like the dragons would have more space. They're probably used to having more space, but all right. Well, we'll come back. We'll come back to the Lockery's home at some point right now. Yeah, I think stone actually does make sense for them, John, because they're dragons and they're worried about a mishap, so they don't want to burn their own homes down. But let's go back to the Fast Cat Tavern and continue to build that out. So we need some doors. We've got front doors. We've got a back door. We're gonna need some windows, probably simple windows. I don't imagine that the tavern owners would want to spend a lot of money on windows, but they have some. The first floor is meant to be able to be airy and open because stinky travelers, right? We would I'm going to say that we're not going to have any windows in the towers on the first floor. They like the idea of that being sort of a space where they would have otherwise given the appearance of it being more castle and keep like. I think that rather than the towers necessarily being secure, that tower is actually going to serve as sort of a storeroom. It's nothing fancy, but it's a nice spot that from the outside looks imposing and ominous, and from this side just serves as a nice storeroom. They're able to it's got a lock on it, but it's nothing terribly secure. A good thief would be in and out of there quickly, and anybody else would probably just be able to batter the door down. But these folks are going to need some tables, because it is, in fact, the Fast Cat Tavern. They like the idea of round tables because it gives them the feeling of being a little bit fancier. It took a little bit more effort for somebody to cut this material into a circle rather than it simply be a squared off table. They're kind of dense right there, but I'm okay with that for now. They also have some see, John, actually the Fast Cat Tavern is actually populated by tabaxis. So the family actually are tabaxi, and rather than polymorphed, they're truly tabaxis. So let's see. I know there was something in here for games, instruments. What do we want to put here? We need some kind of materials that these people might have for sale. But I don't want to have it look like stuff's just scattered. Well, they need a bar, right? It's a tavern. It's a very large bar. We're going to scale that down a little bit. So the bar, and we can scale that up a little bit now, I think. Turn our snap off. So the bar serves as both the sort of the main desk for the inn. This area over here, we're going to go ahead and see about throwing some shelves of some sort for there you go. Use the bookcase style. Let's see if we blow that up to 0.7, how big that is. I think that scale-wise looks good. We're going to make that so that it faces into the space. I did that wrong. So it faces... It's killing me. Okay. That faces into the space. We'll turn 190. And again, the idea here is just to to be representative. We don't need them to be exactly the number of shelves or anything like that. The idea is just to give the feeling of there being some sort of stock that this family of tabaxis maintains, so that people can come in and purchase wares. Travelers coming through can sell and buy stuff at the Fat Cat Castle. Gotta make a note of that one. See, the nice thing about doing these streams, though, is that all of this is recorded, so I get to download this and rewatch it. I don't have to necessarily keep tremendously wonderful notes. All right, so that is the basics of the first floor of the Fat Cat Castle. I'm not going to start on the second floor today, only because it requires jumping into... for my purposes, it requires jumping into a whole nother map. There's a couple of different ways that we could do that as far as layering with this, but when it comes to then exporting it for the VTT in Foundry, I find that this works better for my purposes. It's not to say that that is the best way or the only way. It's simply the way that I am going to be doing it right now. Like so many things in life, there is more than one way to achieve almost anything that you're seeking to do. Right. So now we have yet to make a privy for the dragons. That's going to be a down the road thing. But not literally down the road. I just mean later on in the process of fleshing out this town. The Fast Cat Tavern very likely would have some sort of outhouse for the family. It's entirely reasonable to think that they would have just chamber pots for guests. It gives an illusion of status, I think, if you are having the owners clean up your shit. Makes people feel a little more taken care of. So, all right, let's hit save. All right, I like it. I think this is a great starting point for a town. We've gone through the early phases of building out a town and establishing a little bit of a backstory for it. We have our as yet undescribed and unnamed misanthrope's home, the individual who sort of established this place to begin with. We have established the Pew homestead, where Reginald has been living out his existence as a horse after his true polymorph experience. We have the home of the quote-unquote Lockery family, the Shod and Fernie, who are in fact dragons in disguise, which are like robots in disguise, but don't expose us to copyright infringement. And then we have recently had the Fast Cat Castle Inn established in more recent years, catering to a series of travelers who have found themselves using this now much more developed dirt road connecting two as yet unknown cities in this unknown part of the world. So I think that's where we are going to leave our building project for today. I like, Chris, you had mentioned earlier that you like this this program, and yeah, I like DungeonDraft and I like WonderDraft. I'm gonna go ahead and I've got that saved. I'll go ahead and pull up WonderDraft for a minute just to go ahead and show it. It is also created by Megasploot. It is a really neat tool. I like it a lot. I'll just go through it really fast. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but with WonderDraft is a way of creating world setups. Like DungeonDraft, you can import outside assets. You have a variety of templates you can choose from. We're going to go ahead and start with a 4K sized, and then you can change your themes. And what your themes do are change the basic color spectrums of your maps. Again, not sponsored in any way, shape, or form. These are products that I have bought to do maps and build maps for these settings. So just showing it to you real quick. But basically, you can come in and paint land, which that's cool. You can also raise land out of the water. You can change the roughness and brush size. So if you want something that is more fractal and looks a little bit more coastline-ish, you are able to create that way. Kind of give this a series of islands around it, say, and then we can go ahead and actually do overlays. So Chris had asked about adding hexes. This is the tool where you can go ahead and add hex patterns. We will go ahead and we're going to go ahead and make that hex white just so that it's more obvious. We can change the scaling by changing the size of the hex. We can change the line width depending on how heavy we want it. Yeah, so there's a lot of cool things that you can do in both WonderDraft and DungeonDraft. They're both really neat programs. John, I would say that I've now been using both of these for maybe 2 months, and I would say that I got a reasonable sense of their basic sort of functionality pretty quickly. They're fairly intuitive. There's a lot of YouTube content out there about how exactly to use these, but for a true beginner, I think these are great tools. Again, they're inexpensive. They're on Humble Bundle was where I got them. I'm sure you can get them through other sources as well, but I just don't know. But that's where I have found them. I'm typing stuff in the wrong window. But yeah, they're really neat. I like them quite a bit. Gonna go ahead and throw out the fact that folks can follow us on a whole bunch of... It would help if I spelled social right. I told you guys I do not spell... Did I spell social right? S-O-C-I-A-L. I did spell it right? Holy cow. All right. Whatever. You can find us on all sorts of places. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us, of course, here on Twitch, where you have already found us. You can find us on YouTube. And the easiest thing to do is just go visit our website, which is hp2xp.com. That gives you links to all of our various and sundry places. As I wrap... hit the wrong buttons. As I wrap up here, I want to thank everybody who has spent time hanging out with us today. Again, we are kicking off our actual campaign starting December 16th. We have another round of play on a non-live streamed episode 0 that we are shooting this coming Wednesday. Those pre-streams, we're referring to them as, those episodes 0A and 0B, are eventually going to be Patreon exclusives. So they will appear in our Patreon feed eventually. So if you have any interest in supporting the channel generally and the project broadly, you can do it through Patreon. You can do it by subscribing here. We're 4 subscriptions away from unlocking our 3rd emote. And that's all because of all y'all. So I appreciate everybody who has taken time to jump in and join us today. I'm going to be doing this again next Saturday as well, and we are going to be continuing to do some world building. We may continue to pick up the Reginald's story and quest and continue building that out. We may do something different. We'll see what folks want to do. So as always, thanks for joining me. Thanks for the support. Thanks for the subscriptions and the follows and the shares and all of that. Thanks for hanging out in chat. John, Chris, Cross, Pim, Sarah, Mike, everybody that joined in today. Friday, when you had the opportunity to be here, all of you, I appreciate you, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.